Who knows how many are going to come out of the, into the public domain in the coming weeks. It will be the same for the Conservatives as well. It wouldn't surprise me if Labour has got operations out there looking at candidates. It feels like this is going to be a dirty tricks election more generally.
It's been a pretty horrific week for Keir Starmer. I would say it's been the worst week of his leadership.
It's embarrassing and difficult, and you don't feel like it's the end of the story. And standing back, we should talk about the different elements of what has gone wrong. I think the one thing I would say hasn't gone wrong is that Keir Starmer had to say, after what had gone before, that he was going to be a Labour leader who rooted out anti-Semitism, and that he would not compromise on that, and he mustn't compromise on that, and I don't think he has done. But at the weekend, it was a mess because you have this by-election candidate who has been selected. It turns out some months before, in October, I think it was, last year, he was at a party meeting to reassure local people that the Labour Party hadn't become so gung-ho on support for Israel, come what may, that they weren't listening to the concerns of the local community. And they were worried, as you said, because the deadline had passed, that if he was withdrawn as the candidate and that you handed over the seat, as de facto would happen to George Galloway. I mean, George Galloway is a more dangerous person in Parliament from the Jewish community's point of view to be defending or to be representing the Rochdale seat. So it was a problem for them. But then, as you said, they didn't know, it seems, the words he'd used. And the words he used were, he referred to people in the media from certain Jewish quarters who had been winding up remarks Andrew MacDonald had said, an MP who was suspended last year. And the moment you start talking about, the Jewish media, you're absolutely into anti-Semitic tropes. And at that point, Keir Starmer definitely had to act. You could see why he was worried he was going to make things worse. And then it turns out that another candidate, former MP Graham Jones, was also at this meeting, who'd also said, I don't think actually anti-Semitic things, but quite tough things. And then there's a hue and cry, and he's been suspended as well.
So here's a question to you. For those who don't know, you've been heavily involved in, for example, getting the Holocaust Memorial built in Britain, and strong supporter of Labour Friends of Israel and so on. So I don't think anyone doubts your credentials on this. Do you think it's fair to draw a distinction, as some of the shadow cabinet have been trying to do, between criticism of Israel, including very kind of fruity criticism of Israel, which is what the Hindburn candidate, he was saying, like, fucking Israel, British people who go and fight for Israeli army should be put in prison and so on. And what the Rochdale candidate, Azhar Ali, was saying, which was, essentially anti-Semitic things about Jewish influence in the press. Do you think that's just too difficult a distinction to draw?
Well, look, we have the news today from the Community Security Trust that anti-Semitic attacks in the UK have doubled over the last year. Huge rise in anti-Semitic attacks. The Jewish community feels hugely in Britain on the attack, abuse, but also assaults as well. And the Labour Party had the charge of being anti-Semitic, which Keir Starmer had to turn round. So of course he has to be kind of intolerant of anything which looks as though it's anti-Semitic. Part of his problem is, I think he slightly handed over defining what is or isn't anti-Semitic to the charges made in the media or by campaigning groups, rather than necessarily owning that definition himself. It's not clear quite how this is now being defined. There's two things I think to say. First of all, the politics of it. It looks like a sting. I mean, this was recorded in October, but it didn't actually make it into the newspapers, the Mail on Sunday, and then to the Guido Fawkes website until after nominations had closed. Clever politics. I think secondly...
clever politics By the Tories, probably.
Well, by the Tories, but it's not clear.
I mean, I'm told
it's
from
not clear it was a Tory person in there. It could well have been somebody from the hard left who made this recording, who thought this is a way to have a go at Keir Starmer. And there's certainly speculation it's a Labour councillor rather than a Conservative infiltrating activist. But whatever happens, it's massively put Keir Starmer on the defensive, and you feel like this is the thin end of what could be a thick wedge. I mean, how many other recordings are there? Do they have a full recording of this? Have
so
there been
I'm
other
told
people?
there is a full recording of this meeting.
Well,
my Tory sources. I don't know who did the recording. I don't have an answer to your question earlier.
it's not in the public domain yet.
And it's going to be this drip, drip, drip. And there's a kind of, I think before we kind of come on to the broader issue of how Labour should be handling the Gaza conflict and stuff, there is essentially Starmer's central message is, I have changed the Labour Party so I can change Britain. I'm in charge of this party after the disaster of Corbyn and so on. This is absolutely grist to the Tory mill, which is you haven't changed the Labour Party. And isn't one of Starmer's challenges, this is such a kind of recent period of Labour's history when it was taken over by the hard left. It was at the last general election that Jeremy Corbyn was the official candidate to be the Prime Minister. That you're trying to condense in a few years what Neil Kinnock and Tony Blair and John Smith pulled off over many, many years. And so there are going to be loads of things that Labour candidates have said and probably are still saying in meetings around the country. And these days, all you need is a mobile phone and you can record those things. When I was doing my job when I was in my early 20s, I used to go to Labour meetings as the official Conservative observer, but with a tape recorder in my pocket in case someone said anything kind of interesting. Now anyone can do that. And I think, Labour need to have the Starmer leadership needs to work out how it's going to handle potentially quite a lot of these sorts of incidents between now and the general election.
Well, let's come to Labour second. But first of all, the more general point. We are about to have an election which has been 4 or 5 years in the build-up, in which there have been candidates selected for quite a long time, in an era, unlike 2010 or 1997, where you have much more social media and access to easy recording. And this is not going to be the first time that there is a recording about something somebody said or wrote or did, which causes embarrassment. And if you have said, as Keir Starmer has, zero tolerance, then it's very hard for you to not act. And who knows how many are going to come out of the into the public domain in the coming weeks. It will be the same for the Conservatives as well. It wouldn't surprise me if Labour has got operations out there looking at candidates. It feels like this is going to be a dirty tricks election more generally.